Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to be discussing a hot topic, and that is the codependent situationship. What exactly is it? How do we avoid getting into one? What are the tools that we have to be able to deal with these sorts of situations? And is love really possible in this day and age? And if you're going through what one might call a codependent situationship, just let me say I'm very sorry. I know how much emotional pain these sorts of situations can bring up in us. And that's why I think it's so important to discuss it openly and try to find some sort of healing, because we're all going through the same things, and it's just a matter of finding some peace amid the chaos. Alright, so I want to start with a quote that is the spoken word sample that begins the song To Catch a Thief off the record Music to Make Love to Your Old Lady by Lovage, which is one of my favorite records. And it goes, I feel that you shouldn't get involved in an intimate relationship until you are emotionally mature enough to handle it, totally able to cope with your feelings and your sexuality without guilt, inhibition, or phoniness, but with love, tenderness, and honesty. Isn't that so true? So let's try and take that perspective as we move into this discussion of the codependent situationship and try and have some sort of compassion for ourselves and the other people that we deal with in our pursuit of love. Alright, so what exactly is the codependent situationship? I'm no licensed psychologist, so I don't really need to unpack exactly what codependency is or what causes it. A lot of this is something that's conditioned from childhood or certain very formative relationships that we've had in our lives, where we might struggle to find a real sense of self and individuality and this feeling of being okay with ourselves, and this pushes us into something that could be called codependent. And so the very hard truth to accept is that a healthy person who has a very healed perspective on interpersonal relationships is not going to find themselves in a codependent situationship, right? If you are dealing with feelings of codependency in your interpersonal relationships, this is a sign that you need to look inwards and really heal certain things within yourself, certain relationship patterns that you've established, maybe earlier in your life, some conditioning that wasn't necessarily anything you chose, but it's just how you relate to other people. If you're still dealing with these feelings of codependency in your relationships, it could be a sign that you need to step back from dating for a little bit and really take a closer look inside about why it seems that your relationships tend to trend in this direction of feeling like there's some sort of toxicity or unhealthiness or just general unpleasantness. And then the situationship aspect, right? This is a not so clearly defined relationship that, could be a little bit on again, off again, or could have these feelings of mismatched expectations. And this is again relating to this feeling of a healthy approach to relationships, right? When you approach a relationship in a healthy manner, there is this feeling of mutual respect and honesty that should preclude the forming of something you could call a situationship. But at the same time, labels aren't always the be-all end-all of a healthy relationship. So whether you want to call it boyfriend, girlfriend, lovers, partners, or situationship, we're all kind of talking about the same thing here. And this is the romantic connection between two people. So let's give ourselves a little grace in this process and understand that the codependent situationship is a label that we have applied to a certain style of relationship that has existed for many decades beforehand. This is just how we talk about it in the year 2026. And, how useful a label may be, it really depends on your individual case, If you want to write something off as being a codependent situationship, then this is labeling it as something unhealthy that you don't want to pursue, You don't want to go back there. And this could almost give us like a little bit of a poisoned look at some of our relationships, right? If you approach this as more like a romantic relationship between two people who are not fully healed and they're just doing what they need to do to feel okay, this affords a little bit more compassion in the process, right? Like, as soon as you write it off as a codependent situationship, then that means you really shouldn't be touching that. It means you should take a step back and, like I mentioned, work on yourself, work on how you approach relationships in a healthy manner, and maybe that this connection was not right for you. But if you also want to look at it as like, this is a love connection, and it is true love, but there is something holding us back from really fully making this into a healthy relationship that could develop into something greater. So maybe understanding exactly what the situation that you're thinking of is to you and where it lands on the spectrum of, is this something that you do want to write off and leave in your past and move on from, or is this something that is a little bit more open-ended and you're willing to work on it? And if it is something that you're willing to work through, this label of codependent situationship is not going to help you. You really need to approach it from a much more individual perspective of looking at what your own flaws or conditioning were in what set up this situation, and then working with this other person to try and figure out exactly what they needed out of this relationship, or why they might have acted the way that they acted as well. So what causes the codependent situationship? Like I mentioned, this is a situation where two people who haven't really fully healed a lot of their deepest wounds are coming together, and it can be very beautiful in some ways. And this is where the codependency stems from, is that you can be taking care of each other in a sense and maybe giving each other a little bit of a band-aid over some of these wounds, where the romantic love almost provides this sort of like tranquilizing effect, where when you have this feeling of being in an intensely passionate relationship, you don't really have to look inside at those wounds so deeply. But then you've set yourself up on this unhealthy foundation where you can't really build a much deeper reciprocal relationship moving into the future, because, like I mentioned, this is kind of a band-aid issue to solve some things that you haven't really fully worked through. And there is also this feeling of like something in our 21st century dating scene that could be contributing to this. And I usually tend to write off these time-bound concerns as, we've all faced these same struggles in the past, and there's nothing different about 2026 that makes it so you can't find love. But there are some worthy concerns about the emergence of dating apps and this feeling of prioritizing the infinite choice of people in this kind of capitalist mindset of evaluating people as options and marriage prospects rather than seeking a true love connection. But again, this is something that has been present in romantic love since the beginning. There's this feeling of looking for a marriage prospect who might be of political value or monetary value. So there is always this kind of contrasting feeling of looking for someone who is the right fit for you in a more material sense, but then also trying to maintain the strong feeling of love. And I think where the codependent situationship type of relationship lands is closer to this feeling of a love connection, where maybe materially you aren't in the place to develop this relationship in the best way. But I also think that there is some illusion in this as well, because people might tend to use their material conditions as an excuse for why they can't build healthy relationships, or why they can't find love. But if you think about it, love can be found in the most desperate, cold, harsh conditions. Like, people fall in love during war, people fall in love when they're living on the streets. And of course, these relationships might be difficult in some ways because your material conditions might just make your life harder in general. But I think as someone who is an advocate for the value of love, I will say that love is possible, even in the most dire situations. So I think that if you are in some sort of situation where you feel like maybe due to your mental health, or maybe some past traumas, or you're at a certain pivotal stage in your career or something like that, that it's important to remind yourself that you do deserve love. And there is a possibility for a really compassionate and healthy relationship to grow, even when you're facing these struggles that you might have previously felt like had precluded you from forming a healthy relationship. So again, this is this feeling of coming to the table with a lot of grace and compassion for yourself. Or I think if you go into a relationship with this feeling of, I'm a damaged person and none of my relationships have worked out in the past and I can only hurt people, or I can only get hurt in love, this is what you're going to create in your relationships. Because there is always this little seed of doubt that even if you don't think it's affecting anything in your relationship, it actually will affect the whole development of it and the whole dynamic with this other person. Where if you have this strong feeling of, I don't deserve love, no one is ever going to fully love me, see me for who I am, fully commit to me, and have this reciprocal sense of helping me grow, then the seed of doubt is going to poison the whole relationship, so to speak, because you'll never be able to fully trust that other person. There's always this adversarial dynamic of, this person is going to hurt me, or there's something about this relationship that is going to end in pain. right? And even if you are not physically speaking these things into existence of saying like, I don't trust you, you're going to hurt me, or anything like that, even if it's completely unconscious even, it just affects the way that you relate to other people. And this kind of feeling of not feeling held or feeling safe in love. And this really speaks to, again, like this feeling of being not fully healed, where your nervous system is just not able to rest and be comfortable and go with the flow of things. And this is what leads to this kind of alertness and tension in a relationship, and creates a sort of instability. At the same time, there are practical measures that you could put in place in a relationship in order to help yourself feel more secure. And really what it comes down to is, like I mentioned in this opening quote, and some of the other things I've been talking about, is being able to cope with your feelings on your own and then speak these feelings openly and honestly to another person. So I think where the codependent situationship can sometimes emerge is where people fall into it, like I mentioned, as this band-aid solution to their problems, but they're not actually willing to work through the problems that might come up in the development of this relationship, where relationships are one of our key ways that we can heal, because they trigger so much about ourselves. And especially when it comes to a romantic relationship, it's really triggering those deepest insecurities, those deepest trust issues and wounds that you might have in your dealings with other people. So take it as an opportunity to really go within, to really examine yourself and examine what your needs are out of romance, what your needs are out of a partner who is going to care for you in your life, or even your day-to-day needs now, just looking at the present moment, like, what do I actually want this person to be doing in my life? Am I looking for some sort of whirlwind romance to distract me from the fact that I'm maybe dealing with certain mental health concerns, or that I don't really have a strong sense of self? Or am I coming to the table as a really complete, whole person who has everything I need, and romance is just the cherry on top for me? All right. And I think if you're coming to a relationship with this perspective of, I'm healed, I'm full, whole in myself, I don't need anyone else, but it would be nice to have a companion to share my days with, then I think it's impossible for you to get into a codependent situationship. And this is because when you see those first signs of, there's some miscommunication, there's not a full openness and honesty, this person is maybe leading me along, or they don't really know what they want, or I don't really know what I want, then you immediately will take a step back and realize, well, I'm not going to get into something toxic. And in this sense, this is the best way to avoid the codependent situationship, is just to be very healthy in yourself, understand your own needs, right? Don't focus so much on the other person. And I think that this is where it really creates a struggle and this feeling of modern dating. There's no one good out there. All these people are just looking to play these ego games, and no one really wants true love, right? But when you're coming at it from that perspective, in a way you're participating in these same ego games, because you're attributing a sort of adversarial or evil or scheming quality to the people that you date, which might not necessarily be true. I mean, at the end of the day, we are all looking for love. Everyone wants to be seen, supported, and cared for. But whether or not you go about this in a healthy way, or whether you get into something that might be a little bit more toxic and difficult to deal with, at the end of the day, it is your decision. It is your choice. And what's really important is this feeling of empowerment. If you want to have a healthy relationship, that is something you can build. You have the power to do that. It's easy to have this feeling that society is out to get you and that there's no space for true love in our world. But when you fall into this mentality, like I mentioned, you're only going to replicate that in your relationships. But when you come at relationships with more of a sense of honesty and compassion for yourself especially, this then transforms into a sort of compassion for other people that allows love to flourish. And I might be a little bit of a hopeless romantic, but I do believe that when there is true love, there is a way to make it work. And like I mentioned, in cases of war, people made it work. If you found someone who you truly love, there is this level of committing to it and making it work, but also not letting yourself slip into something that is unhealthy for you. Because if you put up with a situation that is unhealthy just because you love another person, this is really not an act of love, because you are incurring emotional damage in the process, and that person is probably going to go through some emotional damage as well. And It's this feeling of you don't want to be sacrificing the integrity of the relationship just for this band-aid feeling of being close to each other in the moment. And I think especially a lot of the people who are watching my channel and the people who might be using the term codependent situationship are quite young. This understanding that relationships take time to develop, and a relationship that feels like true love is something that will stick with you for a long time. So to just write it off and say this was a codependent situationship and I'm done with it, if that's what you want to do, then fine, go ahead. But if you have this feeling of growth and compassion, you might understand that there's a possibility that you could come back to this, put a pin on it for later. When you've done some of your healing work, this person might come back into your life in another form, or you might find someone else even, or there is just this openness and hope to what may come when you're at a different place in your life, right? Like maybe when this thing was a codependent situationship, you were both a little bit unhealed. But who knows, maybe in 5 years from now, even, you might run into each other again, and that feeling of love and compassion will still be there, but without any of these behaviors that you might have been falling into when you were in this more unhealed version of yourself. All right, and what is in your toolkit to be able to deal with a codependent situationship? And I've mentioned kind of vaguely some of these strategies about working on yourself. And what that really means is just being able to sit with yourself and not have anyone around and really face yourself for who you really are. And people can be a wonderful mirror. And like I mentioned, relationships can bring up a lot of triggers for us to work on. But at the end of the day, the most important part is coming back to yourself and really feeling comforted and held in your own presence, right? You don't need another person to physically be holding you in order to feel safe and secure and have your nervous system rest. Certainly a hug is nice, but if you can't get to that point of feeling calm and just being able to take a breath and really feeling held by yourself, you're never going to be able to feel fully held in that relationship. You really need to get to that point on your own first. And when it comes to these triggers, this could involve maybe working through this in a therapy setting, or it could be something you work on in your own time, just through journaling or through meditation or through conversation. And if you've watched my channel, you know that I'm a big advocate for meditation. This is something I really believe in, of just being able to sit with yourself, and it's so beneficial for your nervous system to just be able to breathe and understand that you're not under attack. There's nothing to run from. There's no one who is going to be able to hurt you when you're in the state of just understanding that you have all the power, right? And then this carries into your relationships as well. You come to the table, like I mentioned, as this whole, complete person, and nothing can really hurt you in a sense, right? If someone comes at you trying to do some toxic relationship behavior, you are empowered enough to say, I'm not going to slip back into these old patterns of behavior that I recognize to be unhealthy. I am willing to take a step back. And this is where I think that one of the most beneficial things in your toolkit when it comes to the codependent situationship is no contact. And I know this is a little bit difficult for some people, and especially if there's this feeling of codependency, that is like the one thing that you can't do is cut this person off, of course. But understand that if you want something healthy, you have to challenge yourself to overcome this hurdle where you think it's so impossible. Like, I can't imagine not having this person in my life, even if things are really unhealthy and we're doing this kind of push-pull cycle that just doesn't feel good. It's just to say, you know what, I love myself enough, as much as I love this other person, I love myself enough to take a step back and not be involved in something that doesn't feel good. And this really does mean no contact, right? Like, do not be watching this person's social media. Do not be contacting them energetically, right? If this person's always on your mind and running your day and your emotions just from the thoughts that you're maintaining about them in the situation, that is not a healthy way to approach this either, right? It is this general feeling of avoidance, of running away from yourself by trying to find yourself in another person. And like I mentioned, as much as you have these strong feelings of love for someone, true love can only blossom when there is this healthy way of going about it, right? So if you really truly love this person, you might understand that the best thing you could do for both of you is to take a step back and really work on yourself, reassess the situation, put a pin on it, and come back to it later. And where this might be a little bit difficult is especially if you have these feelings of true love, is the sense of urgency might come in of like, we need to do it now, or this person is going to slip away and find someone else, and I'm never going to see them again, and I'm never going to find true love. Right? This is an unhealthy way of approaching the situation, because if you're really whole in yourself and you really feel comfortable, you'll understand that even if this person did find someone else and you didn't end up in a relationship with them, you're gonna be okay. Like, it's gonna be fine. And even if you did have this really strong feeling of like, they're my true love, I really believe that when you get to this point of being okay with it, open to the possibility of there being something with this person, or open to the possibility of there being something with someone else, or even just being okay with being a bit of a spinster. Once you get to that point of security, that's where you can build a healthy relationship from. As long as you have the sense of urgency of, I need this person, I need to do something to get this person to be with me, that's when you've slipped into this feeling of a relationship that can never be reciprocal or healthy. All right, and how can you make peace if you've gone through this codependent situationship process, or if you're currently in one, or if you're looking to get back into dating but you're worried about slipping into this again? And how do you process all these difficult emotions? Well, I really believe that this is something you have to do for yourself. Again, I think a lot of people are mistaken in the fact that they need closure from this other person. Like, I need to sit down and have a conversation with this person about my feelings. And I need them to see how I really feel, and I need them to reciprocate my feelings as well. And again, this is this mistaken feeling of looking for yourself in someone else and needing them to validate your perspective and needing them to share your perspective, when really, if you are at this point of being able to build something healthy, you'll understand that it's more important that you do it for yourself, to show yourself that you've witnessed your emotions, to be really honest with yourself, right? And because, especially if you're trying to develop a romantic relationship with someone, it can be very hard to show up to that honestly. And especially if you haven't done the work for yourself, you're going to be showing up to that conversation with this feeling of, I'm trying to get them to be in a relationship with me. And in this way, you might compromise certain truths, or just try and twist this dynamic into something. Like, you're trying to shape it based on your desires of what you want from this person, right? But when you really figure out what you want for yourself and the truth in yourself, it then becomes impossible to lie to another person or to manipulate them in some, again, like, it could be completely unconscious. It's not like you're like manipulating them with some sort of mind games to get them to be in a relationship with you, but it does come out as this manipulation when you haven't really been honest with yourself about what you need and what you're feeling. You're going to be presenting your feelings in a way that is trying to get something out of someone, which is not healthy. And practically, how can you make yourself feel seen? Like I mentioned, some of these strategies of journaling or meditation can be very important. Having conversations with someone like a therapist or a trusted friend or a family member, or maybe channeling some of these feelings into art, or speaking your truth in some way. Like, it could be making a YouTube video about your feelings, or it could mean writing something like an article, a personal essay, or it could be, yeah, like just meditating on the concept of love and cultivating these feelings of love inside yourself, these feelings of compassion for yourself and the wounds that you've had that might have caused you to get into these sorts of relationships in the past. Cultivating compassion for this other person, I think, is extraordinarily important, that I think a lot of people struggle with. It's like, the situation really hurt me, and even though we were both wounded and we caused pain in each other, it's so easy to just project your feelings of negativity onto this person, of like, they were a player, or they didn't know what they wanted, or they're just like an evil person, all men are trash, all women are trash. These sorts of feelings that make it really easy to deflect what the honesty of the situation is. And the honesty of the situation is, 99% of the time, is that you were both unhealed in some way. You were both hurt people, and when you came together, it amplified each other's wounds in a way that made it very difficult to have a healthy relationship. And when you really come with this compassion of, neither of us were really in the wrong, but it simply didn't work out, then I think that's when you're much more likely to have this warm and loving relationship flourish in the future. Where if you're always trying to blame it on someone, of like, all my past relationships didn't work out because of the other person. Or even blaming yourself of like, all my relationships didn't work out because I was doing something wrong, I was unlovable, I don't know how to have a healthy relationship. If you're cultivating these thoughts inside yourself, it's only gonna cause more guilt and pain and resistance to having a healthy relationship. And I know it feels almost counterintuitive that you have to get to this point of just being able to love someone despite their flaws or despite their unhealed behavior. But this is not to say that you should encourage that unhealed behavior. It's this compassion for why someone might have acted the way that they did and understanding that they still deserve love for it. And maybe it doesn't have to be your love, but just being able to say, you know what, this person does deserve love, even if things didn't work out between us, I think is going to get you so much further in your own journey of cultivating love for yourself, of then turning it back inwards and saying, you know, I had some behavior that was unhealed as well, and I forgive myself, I repent, and I'm going to do better in the future. So, really, the whole sense of if you're trying to overcome this codependent situationship feeling is to look at it from just a more optimistic lens and with more compassion for the players involved, of not trying to write it off as, you know, this person was a bad person or I was a bad person or there was something deeply flawed in our relationship, but rather that there was some factor that just didn't allow things to flow harmoniously. And when you work through that factor in yourself, things will flow a lot more harmoniously for you in the future. And the question everyone has on their minds, is it possible to find true love in this day and age? Well, as a hopeless romantic, I truly believe it is possible for everyone to find the love that is out there for them, right? This is something I've said on my channel before, and it's if you love in a certain way, there is going to be someone out there in the world who loves in that same way. And you're going to be able to build a really thriving, strong, healthy connection with someone who is out there for you. And it's just a matter of time of having this patience, optimism, and compassion to keep yourself in the state where you're open and ready for love, instead of becoming embittered and cynical by these past wounds that have been reopened or new wounds that have been opened in relationships. It's to really just approach things with this understanding that love is out there. And if you do feel like there are certain concerns in the 21st century world that make it harder for you to date, you could actually opt out of some of those issues, right? Where if you think dating apps are a really unhealthy way to date, you don't have to go on dating apps. You could meet someone in so many other ways. And I've mentioned some dating strategies on my channel before, so feel free to go check out those videos if you're curious about that. But I think at the end of the day, this need to be dating could also contribute to the formation of the codependent situationship of like, again, you're chasing a relationship because you feel like you need something and that you don't already have. So if you're really focused on dating and the dating scene and why things aren't working out for you because of that, and blaming it on certain sociocultural factors or cultural trends within dating, like again, you've lost it, right? Because then you're externalizing your love into something that could be pinned down in just the world, right? When really your love is just this light that emanates from within you, and it will attract in the person who is right for you simply by existing in the world. So I know this was a little bit of a convoluted video. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot to discuss, and I think a lot more that could be unpacked as well. So if you have any thoughts on the topic, please feel free to share in the comments below. I'd really love to hear from you guys. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.